I'm sure if you dig deep into Doctor Who history, I can probably find episodes that are like objectively worse than this one in terms of the production, the acting. It's a well-made bit of TV. I'm sure I can find many episodes that I deem worse than the Interstellar Song Contest. However, it's been several days since the broadcast of the episode, and I'm struggling to think of another episode that I wish just hadn't been made. I just wish that this episode just wasn't put into production. I just kind of feel like if this episode is not willing to actually interrogate the themes that it's trying to talk about, if it's not actually willing to confront the topic that it clearly is trying to, like I said, it's called Poppy Honey. Like, the land of milk and honey. These are like pretty clear parallels that cannot have been accidental. Orphan 55 is probably a worse episode, but I don't think Orphan 55 probably shouldn't have been made. With everything coming out post-October 2023, I just want to know whose idea it was to press forward. This episode was probably being written around the time of October 7th, and was certainly in pre-production in the months after it. There's millions of these stories that have been coming out since October 7th, and I just want to know, why did they actually decide to press on with this story? I want to know who the individual was who, come March or April 2024, decided, let's press on, let's keep going. That's all I want. I want a name. I just want to know, whose feet does this fall at? The Interstellar Song Contest, touted as like the big event blockbuster episode of the series. It's apparently the most expensive episode of Doctor Who ever made, and it's also basically the big gambit for Russell T Davies in regards to the scheduling, because this is the episode that leads into the finale, of course, but it is also the episode that it has confirmed now that the overnight viewing figures are in, that it is the most viewed episode of the series, in regards to the overnights at least, because it was between the FA Cup final and Eurovision Song Contest. And this appears to have been an episode that was specifically made from the ground up to be a Eurovision companion piece. Interestingly, it comes from not just like a first-time writer for Doctor Who, but it also comes from like Juno Dawson, who it's her very first ever TV credit. She has done work for Doctor Who's Expanded Universe before. She's done a few Torchwood stories for Big Finish, which I've really enjoyed. She wrote The Good Doctor, which is a 13th Doctor BBC Books novel from 2018, and she seemed like a very natural pick for a writer of Doctor Who, having circled around the Expanded Universe and also being in the Doctor Who podcast last season. And when it comes to the Interstellar Song Contest, I want to open this reaction with the positives, because I don't want you to think that there's absolutely nothing redeemable about this episode. When it comes to the production, there are, of course, a few moments of like hokey effects and strange, like cheap aliens and masks and the crowd scenes and stuff like that. But I'm watching Doctor Who. That's kind of there, it's part of the charm for me. I'm happy with all of that. When it comes to the actual direction, I think that Ben A. Williams did a really strong job. I think that he got really strong performances out of the cast. I think that he shot many of like the big dramatic scenes with the intensity that were clearly expected of him. And I also think that some of the imagery, particularly in that first act, when Kid attacks the Interstellar Song Contest and basically they all get sucked up into the atmosphere, I thought the imagery there was genuinely really haunting. The big shot that everybody's talking about is the wide shot, when you see the space and you see all these bodies from a distance sort of like floating out. I actually think that the shot that really got me, that one was great, but the one that I really liked was when the Doctor is in the foreground on the left of the screen, fiddling with the control panel, and you see behind him in the background the people starting to like get sucked up in the Mavity vortex, that's sort of like making its way out and eventually gets him. That was genuinely like really haunting imagery, like sort of like being in the middle of essentially a terrorist attack. And I thought that it was abstract and sci-fi enough to be suitable for a younger audience to a point. Like, some kids may have been scared and behind the sofa for it, but that's Doctor Who's remit. But it was still scary enough for grown-ups to kind of understand the implication. I thought that, stuff like that was actually quite effectively done. I think that the bickering gay couple, Gary and Mike, I thought that they were pretty fun. I actually thought that they had a nice little arc over the course of the story, where you've got this couple who are bickering. One of them's not big on Eurovision, and the other one is their whole identity. And I thought that was fun. And then it kind of feels like if the events of the story hadn't have happened, they would have split up. But then they start like seeing each other in their element in a new light, and they sort of end up like almost like meeting for the first time when you've got the medic who is treating a patient and his partner's never seen that before. And I thought that stuff was really, really nice. I thought there were some really cool moments when the doctor is floating in space and is like starting to freeze, and then he uses a confetti cannon in order to get back to the space station. I wish that they hadn't have lampshaded the campness of it. You need one of the characters watching to say, is that a confetti cannon? Just so that the audience are primed for what's about to happen, so that they can sort of like know what's happening when it's happening. That was fine. But then when he just gets back on the ship and outright says it was camp, like, come on, have faith in the premise. It felt like it was sort of like second guessing itself, which is a bit of a shame. I think as well that Freddie Fox's kid is playing the role with such heft, with such commitment to how much pain he's clearly in throughout the duration, that I don't actually know if it was meant to be like the text of the episode or not in terms of just the script, but it made for a really strong performance, I think. I think Miriam Teakley, brilliant vocalist, great performance in the episode as Cora. And I think that there are some moments that fans have said that they didn't enjoy that. Personally, I actually kind of appreciated. I liked Belinda's little panic attack moment, which a little bit, some of it's funny, like, oh, you're in this place. Oh, where's that? Oh, you're in this Western Quadrant. Where's that? Like, I liked that. I thought that sort of like mini Tegan Javanka inspired panic attack was a nice little beat. I liked Rylan in this episode, surprisingly good. And I love the sort of the visual storytelling going on there when he just steps out of the cryopod, is like, okay, where am I? What year? Let's do this thing. Like, I kind of like the idea that maybe he's not even like exclusively booked for the Interstellar Song Contest. I kind of like the idea that he's sort of just wheeled out from event to event, and he's like, yeah, this is just my life now. My family get great royalties and paychecks and stuff, and I thought that was really, really fun. I liked that a lot. Graham Norton was fun as well. I kind of liked the sort of camp hologram when he's expositing what happened to Earth at the end. Yeah, that was good. Maybe they should have taken his cameo a little bit further. And I know this would have been like the fanboyiest of fanboy things to have done, but maybe he interrupts the episode in the bottom right as a hologram, like so as sort of like a callback to the Time of Angels back in 2010, when the little miniature animated Graham Norton interrupted the cliffhanger ending to that story and got complaints. That was very funny. But I acknowledge that would have been a really deep fanboy cut that the rest of the viewing population would have just not gotten. And that's okay. I'm happy about that. I understand. Okay, it was not my cross to bear as a producer, and maybe it's for the best that I'm not in the room when these decisions are made. Okay, I'll say that much. Or the moment from Rose, yeah. The doctor's wandering around the Space Museum, and Graham Norton's like sound checks are happening in the room, and then the hologram appears. That could actually be a good way to make that work. I like the idea of Die Hard at Eurovision. Yeah, because Die Hard is basically a genre in and of itself, a subgenre in and of itself, where big but limited location, where there's no escape, and you have to like fight your way through a terrorist attack to save everybody. However, it feels a little bit disingenuous to say that this is an accurate Die Hard homage, because Die Hard is not just one guy fights terrorists in a building. Die Hard is also about it's a story that plays with perspective. It's a story that plays on verticality. It's about the resources on the outside of the Nakatomi Plaza and the resources on the inside of the Nakatomi Plaza, and John McClane navigating around that. And I think, it's a cool punchy pitch, Die Hard at Eurovision, but it feels a little bit stretched there. Conceptually, I can understand why in 2022, 2023, they think, let's do Die Hard at Eurovision. That's going to be the nice big pitch. Let's do that. And then what I assume happens over the development of this story, in terms of the scripting and the initial drafts, and we don't have the definitive, concrete timeline as to when this story was written and made. We can allude some details from Doctor Who magazine interviews where Russell T Davies says that most of the scripts were written by, October 2023, and then they start filming around like spring 2024. There's no way to dance around the political allegories and the subtext and the text in the episode. And even Juno Dawson herself on Instagram the day before the episode dropped was like, my episode's broadcasting tomorrow, can't wait for you all to see it. It's all political. She says it's all political. It's inviting this conversation. It's inviting this discussion. So there are simply too many coincidences in the Interstellar Song Contest for this to have not been, at least in some way, a story that's drawing parallels to Israel. Because, of course, let's play devil's advocate here, or Hellions advocate, and let's say that this episode was written pre-October 7th, 2023. And for you saying that, and for people in the chat saying that that's not an excuse, I'll come back to this. Let's say it's all written and all locked in prior to that. So, Israel's controversial participation in Eurovision has been a thing prior to October 7th, for like the past 5 years prior. There was a Eurovision at Tel Aviv in 2018, 2019. There were protests then. There was a big, brouhaha, shall we say, about all of that. So that might have been in the back of Juno Dawson and Rusty Davis's mind, possibly. And also the Interstellar Song Contest, which is, of course, a Eurovision parallel, obviously, is being sponsored in this story by a genocidal corporation, in this case, Poppy Honey. One of Eurovision's biggest sponsors since 2019 has been Moroccan Oil, which is not Moroccan, and neither does it sell oil. It's an Israeli company. It's a beauty, healthcare. It's like a beauty fragrance product. The Hellions in this story, who we can assume are the stand-in for Palestinians, they were genocided by, quote, the corporation for honey flavoring for the poppy honey. Israel is referred to in the Bible as the land of milk and honey. There's, like I said, there are simply too many coincidences happening in this story for it to have not been about this. And Juno Dawson is not a dumb writer. She's somebody who, I've not read them, but I understand that she's written several books, so in a witchcraft universe and a witchcraft witchcraft fiction, which involves world building, which involves cohesion. She knows about world building and research and these things. But let's say, for example, that this script was written prior to October 7th, and they weren't to know, obviously. Who could? Who would want to believe? But when you're writing this script, and you're in pre-production from October to March, April, why was there no one, or maybe there was someone, and if there was someone, why weren't they listened to, saying, maybe we should hit the brakes here. Maybe we should take stock. We've got a good idea, a good premise. This isn't the right time. Let's put this on the back burner if we want to use this as a concept further later on. Let's figure something else out. I actually think that the first act of the Interstellar Song Contest is really strong. I mentioned that you've got the dynamic between the Eurovision gay couple, Gary and Mike. I think that Kid's a really effective antagonist. I liked the director and the gallery as well. I thought she had a really strong presence on screen. I thought that the cast was really strong, and there was some fun little beats and moments. I liked the Doctor and Belinda reminiscing about Eurovision. I thought that these were some really, really nice scenes. The wheels, however, start coming off in a pretty major way when the Doctor discovers that the big MacGuffin at the heart of this episode is a delta wave. And what happens is that the Doctor then calls Kid via video call and starts chatting to him about basically what he's going to do. And he basically lets loose on Kid, says, "You've put ice in my heart, I'm going to have you freeze in the cold vacuum of space," all of that stuff. Belinda responds and says, that's not like him. He's never normally like this. If the Doctor's angry, this whole station's going to shake. The problems start here, where the Doctor at no point asks, why is Kid doing this? He never asks the question. That in and of itself is massively out of character. And I think that the reason that the Doctor never asks this question is because he needs to do the torture scene later. And I think then everything in the episode spirals out from there. The Doctor's reaction is wildly disproportionate. What he does to Kid, what he says to Kid, because he knows that Belinda and the other 100,000 audience members are still alive. He's the one who saved them. And if he thought they'd died, that might justify it. Might. I'll get back to it. But I can sort of buy that. If he had known that they were dead, or thought that they were dead, that might justify that reaction. And yeah, Kid tried to kill 100,000 people, and the Doctor interfered. Okay, yes. You've just summed up about 60% of Doctor Who. But those stories don't end with the Doctor torturing the antagonist. No, I'm talking about the 100,000 people already. And we're going to get to the 3 trillion, okay? That's your opinion. I'm on the Doctor's side. Cool. Let me say my piece. Complex topic, legitimate questions. We're going to work our way through this. You don't have to apologize, but we're going to work our way through this, okay? That first video call between the Doctor and Kid, when he's incredibly angry and venomous at him, I thought Ncuti did play that really, really well. But on my first viewing, I thought that it was going to be an act. He was blustering to Kid, that he didn't actually have that ice in his heart. I thought that was just a big bit of bluster. I thought, he was playing a role there. Kid even tells the Doctor in that first video conversation, and I went back and rewatched it, I've checked the transcript, Kid tells the Doctor in that conversation that he's getting revenge against the corporation. But the Doctor never asks a follow-up question. It would be one thing if he asked and Kid dodged the question, but the question in the first place never comes up. It was a deliberate choice in this episode to not ask the question or have its main character engage with that question. Do you want to know who the Doctor never talks to in this episode? Cora. The Doctor and Cora never exchange any dialogue in this story. The Doctor is the moral centre of the show. He's the moral force that drives the Whoniverse forward. It's named after him. Doctor Who. And his perspective, his viewpoint, his emotional state, positive or otherwise, is only specifically reserved for Kid. A kid who is named that way because his mother was shot before she could tell anybody his name. And Freddie Fox in this story as Kid plays the role really well, but in such a way that he clearly hates what he's doing. He plays it with such heaviness. He plays it with such, like, just complete defeat and apathy. It's not very clear how much 15 knows about Hellions. He knows nothing. I have watched the story and triple check. He knows nothing about Hellions, because he specifically asks, like, Gary and Mike, what are Hellions? He doesn't know anything about Hellions. So, like I said, these are deliberate creative choices. This script doesn't come out of the ether. It's not a naturally occurring force. Okay, these are creative decisions, and that's why I want to try and break this down step by step. So, the Doctor is the main moral force in this franchise, in this series, in this episode, and he doesn't have anything to say to even what this episode deems to be the, quote, good Hellion. When we get the Doctor in this story, who knows that Belinda and everybody else outside the spaceship are alive because he saved them, it could have been an interesting commentary on what the Doctor behaves like when he knows that his companions aren't looking. That's interesting. If you've been going back to my 20 years later anniversary reactions to the Ninth Doctor stories back from 2005, I've started really, like, picking up and noticing on how Christopher Eccleston plays the Ninth Doctor when people aren't watching him. Obviously the audience are watching it, but he doesn't know that, don't tell him. The way that the Doctor would act in front of Ruby would be different if Ruby wasn't watching, because he's trying to impress Ruby. He's trying to be best schoolmate friends with Ruby. For example, there's Belinda as well, but Ruby, I feel like, is another fun example. So you've got this story with Belinda and the Doctor, where Belinda, the subtext, the metatext over this season is that Belinda is not particularly interested in Doctor Who as a show, but is slowly starting to warm to the Doctor Who as a character. And the big emotional thing for Belinda in this story, apart from her thinking the Doctor is dead, is that she never got to tell the Doctor how wonderful he is. It's a nice little moment because it shows a lot of regret in the face of the Doctor's presumed death. However, with the Doctor thinking Belinda is outside the station, he doesn't think Belinda's watching. So when he goes on his tirade against Kid and starts torturing him, he thinks that there's no way Belinda's going to see. I think that that's an interesting angle to take, but it wants to have its cake and eat it too with this episode. It wants to have the mini arc of Belinda not being able to tell the Doctor how wonderful she thinks he is before he dies, but it also wants to have Belinda be scared by the Doctor for going too far. And as a result, you get this really messy, insincere half measure on both ends, where Belinda just watches the Doctor torture somebody. Belinda has all of the context for the Hellions because Cora gives it to her. The Doctor never gets such context. Once again, these are deliberate narrative choices made in the episode. The episode wants Belinda to love and celebrate the Doctor, but also wants to be critical of the Doctor when he goes too far. And the two elements really clash, and they just don't work here. Belinda gets the exposition scene where she's told by Cora who the Hellions are, that they're this, Helio was this peaceful, lovely world that they never harmed anybody. The corporation came in, terraformed it, genocided them, essentially, for their honey flavouring. I feel like we're really dancing around the elephant in the room here, and that is the torture scene. It's the scene where the Doctor, a genocide victim, tortures another genocide victim, and not even the cries of his granddaughter can break him out of it. I want to show you folks the play-by-play for this, in brief, okay? So the Doctor, not knowing why Kid is doing this, never even asking the question, goes in hologram form to the gallery. So he goes in, effortlessly destroys the Delta Wave, my big feet, incapacitates Kid. He's now no longer a harm to anybody. He can't hurt anybody anymore. He then proceeds to torture him, once again, never asking why he did what he did. His granddaughter tries to break him out of it. He keeps going. Belinda comes in. He has a little, let's call it a wobble, a little, what have I done? Sweet Jesus, what have I done? Belinda and the Doctor hug. Cora and Wynn have their little moment. And the next time the Doctor is on screen is when he says to Kid, once again, he just tortured this guy. Believe me, that ice you put in my heart, I think it's still there. I think it will be there forever now. And then Kid leaves. The Doctor never actually interrogates himself. And then they have this montage, this making your mind up thing. La 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 la, blah 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 blah. She sings a song. Oh, nice. Okay, there we go. Blah blah blah. And then the Doctor now has that moment with Belinda in the corridor when she says, "You're wonderful, but you scare me sometimes." The reason I wanted to show you folks that, the little play-by-play, is that the Doctor's realization as to what he's done, his little, what have I done, sweet Jesus, what have I done, I tortured this kid, it literally doesn't even stick to his next line of dialogue. I've seen a lot of defenses of this episode saying, I want darker Doctor Who. I think we've seen the Doctor be dark and do bad things before. Yes, he has. I'm somebody who loves Dalek. And people have been like, he's done terrible bad things before, like at the ending of Face the Raven when he tried to interrogate and intimidate me, And I get that inclination from fans, but it feels like the defense of the torture scene are ignoring basically everything that came before and came after it. If the Doctor's going to have his little, what have I done? I went too far. Sorry, Belinda. Sorry that I scared you. And then literally his next line of dialogue and his next action is handing Kid over to the corporation. The corporation, by the way, who are responsible for the genocide. What is it that the director calls the prison that Kid's going to be put in? Justice Monolith, thank you. Goes to the Justice Monolith, which is the name of what I would call the worst prison in the universe if I was writing a script and wanted to emphasize the worst prison in the universe. The Doctor hands Kid over to the very corporation who genocided his people and has nothing to say about it. And like I said, his sweet Jesus, what have I done moment, this is the next time we see the Doctor.
See you again, Doctor. I'll be ready, Kid.
And then he has this whole, that piece, that ice in my heart, it's still there. There is no reflection. I mean, he did commit a very bad crime. Let's talk about that. The big defense of this episode I've seen from people, and please let me know if I'm strawmanning, I'm really trying not to. The justification for why it's okay to torture Kid. Once again, a character who is named Kid because his mother was shot before they could give Kid a name, is because he tried to kill 100,000 people, then the Doctor saved him, and then he tries to kill 3 trillion with a delta wave. Okay, the 3 trillion number is fucking ludicrous. I'm sorry. It's one of the most cynical devices I've ever seen Doctor Who try and employ. 3 trillion? Come the fuck on. What's the saying? 1 death is a tragedy, 1 million is a statistic? Like, come on. It's also, once again, the parallels, the political allegories. And I'm sorry to bring this back to like the Israel and Gaza thing, but it's literally the justification for genocide in Gaza right now. They killed X amount on October 7th. And if we don't genocide the Palestinians now, they're going to kill all of us. And the same people who are like, it was okay to torture Kid because he would have killed 3 trillion people, are the same people with fucking Palestinian flags in their bios. Can you not see the comparisons? Can you not see the moral contradiction here? I'm sorry. But also, putting that aside, the Doctor tortures Kid when the Delta Wave has been destroyed and disarmed. He's no longer a threat. Those 3 trillion people are now no longer going to be harmed because the Doctor stopped it, and the Doctor should have stopped him. And using the hard light hologram or whatever to incapacitate Kid, fine. Incapacitate him. But don't fucking torture him. Don't ask why he did it. And then don't hand him over to the corporation who genocided his people. There's not one thing wrong here. There's like dozens of cascading story decisions, deliberate story decisions that end up accumulating into a massive fucking wave of despair. It seems so strange for this to like have happened in the manner that it did. And it's interesting watching the Doctor Who Unleashed episodes for The Story in the Engine and The Well, where they were talking about hiring sensitivity readers and consultants and stuff, so that depictions of deaf people in The Well was done thoughtfully and with nuance. The depiction of Nigerian culture in The Story of the Engine was done thoughtfully and from an authentic perspective. Was there a sensitivity writer on the Interstellar Song Contest, or were they fucking yeeted out of the airlock or something? Like, you do remember the scene where he says it reminded him of people, right? Yes, I do. Fucking and? I'm sorry. How much reach do you think the corporation have? As much as much reach as the episode tells me they have. I'm working with what the episode gives me here. I'm trying to give this the most like good faith interpretation possible. I honestly am. Like, I'm not saying. I promise you, I promise, my intention is not to say Russell and Juno and those at Bad Wolf are, like, pro-genocide or I don't think that's the intention. The framing of the Doctor torturing Kid is obviously meant to be negative. Obviously it's meant to be, like, he's gone too far moment. But the episode makes creative decisions to contrive a scenario when he does go too far, where he does take those steps. He's already saved the 100,000 people in the atmosphere. Kid's already incapacitated. He's no longer a threat. And if the Doctor's meant to be triggered by him being the last of the Time Lords, which also, chat, that's not even apparently the reason. It's so muddled that the canonical reason in the episode that you are using, apparently, that's not even the actual reason, according to Doctor Who Unleashed. Apparently, the reason the Doctor tortures Kid, according to Russell T Davies and according to Ncuti Gatwa, is that when the Doctor was yeeted out into the atmosphere and was frozen, he thought he was going to die, and then Susan saves him, and him being faced with his own mortality, that's apparently the reason. That's apparently why he decides to torture Kid. But he can regenerate. Russell even actually addresses that. If he regenerates in the vacuum of space, he'll just die again and keep regenerating. Like I said, the 3 trillion thing is like such a ludicrous statistic that it removes all nuance from it, and it basically just turns Kid into a comically bad archetype, even though Freddie Fox is not playing it like that, and that this episode appears to be an allegory for Israel and Gaza. So what is the episode even trying to say? And the fact as well that the Doctor decides to torture Kid, and then even at the end of the episode, when he listens to Cora's song and is explained what happened because he didn't fucking ask earlier, what happens is that instead of what you'd assume the Doctor might do and think, I've fucked up here, I know why Kid did what he did, I've just handed him over to the people who did the genocide. So you know what? I'm the last of the Time Lords. I'm going to do what my 12th incarnation said to Bonnie, and said what I'm going to do with this pain. I'm going to hold it tight until it burns my hand. I'm going to swear that no one will ever have to feel this pain. And I'm going to get in my fucking blue box and mend this shit immediately. But no. The Doctor and Belinda walk away from Cora's performance, and the Doctor says, "Oh, this was my Waterloo, or my rise like the Phoenix." Belinda gives him 2 points, 12 points. Apparently, the Doctor's really fucking happy with what he's done today. And also, he tried to kill 3 trillion people. Both sides are bad here. He tried to kill 3 trillion people here, mister. It's 3 trillion. Do you want 3 trillion people to die, Mr. TARDIS? Firstly, they're not really going to die. It's a story decision. But secondly, literally 1 week ago, in The Story in the Engine, the Barber, in his quest to get credit for his work, concocted a plan that would have resulted in the death of 7 billion people. But the Doctor, once the plan had been foiled, talked the Barber out of suicide and said, "Don't let this be how your story ends." The Doctor, because in his quest to be the Doctor, to be the better person, to heal people, to make the universe better, holds out his hand to the Barber and tries to save him. Yes, because that was a different context, mate. I'm trying to engage with this as good faith as possible, guys. I really promise. It's a different context because the Doctor, in the story, figured out what the barber's deal was and then stopped his plan and then went to save him. In the Interstellar Song Contest, the Doctor never even asks the question, which is massively out of character for him. And then, even when he is presented with the context, with the information, does nothing to resolve it and has no actual reckoning with himself as a character. It doesn't happen. It would be like if in Dalek, the Doctor tortures the Dalek and then goes off with Rose in the TARDIS saying, I did a really good job here today, Rose, didn't I? Oh, it was a little bit of a wobble back there, but, you know, deux pois. I'm working with what the episode gives me, chat. The Corporation genocided the Hellions for their poppy honey. They're a sponsor of the Interstellar Song Contest. The Doctor learns this and then does nothing about it. People are saying that this episode both sides the conflict. I don't think it does, actually. I think it's worse than that, because the Doctor has so much venom for Kid. Like, really venomous, like, words that he says to Kid, like that ice you put him, I think it's still there. I'm going to throw you out into the frozen void of space, and, you know, okay. Dark Doctor, cool, whatever, edgy. But then, where's this energy for the Corporation that did the genocide, that still sponsor the Interstellar Song Contest? This isn't even both sides. This is, like, I don't even know what this is. People are saying that, you know, it's Interstellar Song Contest, it's, you know, it's Kablam too. No, if it's, you know, if we're going with the Kablam allegory, if this wants to be Die Hard at Eurovision, it's Kablam 2, Kablam Harder. Like, it's the idea that the Doctor just... The episode ends with such a tone of finality. Apart from, you know, of course, like, the May the 24th, which is obviously happening later, and the Rani. But it ends with such finality in terms of, like, its tone, in terms of the A-plot. There's a reason why the big vibe in the fandom right now is secret good fourth Sherlock territory. It's like, it's so strange because like, people are saying that, yeah, okay, so the episode is gonna, you know, there's gonna be a reckoning, they're gonna figure it out, you know, they're gonna do all of this, it's gonna be great. But, you know, like, in the finale, we know we're going to have the Doctor, Ruby, Belinda, Kate Unit, Mel, Conrad, 2 Ranis, and we're also rumoured to have a 3rd member of the Trinity, maybe a regeneration, maybe Susan, maybe the Fugitive Doctor. Like, if we really are, like, you know, if Apple Tree Yard really is real, even if the intention is to resolve these issues in the future, I'd argue it's creative malpractice to do it in a finale that's already looking so fucking overstuffed. They explain at the end that the Doctor's getting PTSD with what the Master did to the Time Lords and was planning on killing that kid for wanting to kill 3 trillion people. I don't know if you've joined the stream late, Alice. Like, fair enough if you have, but we have already talked about this. The idea that the actual reason, according to Russell and Ncuti Gatwa, is that it wasn't about that. It was actually the Doctor facing his own mortality when he was thrown into the vacuum of space and nearly died. But that's apparently the reason. But even if it was the case... Yeah, Apple Tree Yard is real this time. Even if that was the case, I still don't think it's okay for the Doctor to torture somebody who's a genocide survivor after he's already been disarmed. I don't think that's is that a moral step too far for me? I just don't think that's okay. Especially considering the creative choices made in the lead up to that scene where the Doctor makes no attempt to figure out why he did it, where he already knows Belinda and everybody else outside are already alive. And he says when he gets into that gallery, revenge is just an excuse because your cold, filthy heart just likes to kill. He hasn't even spoken to Kid or asked him why he's doing what he's doing. It's massively out of character. I think I'm fine with the disconnected alien Doctor going too far with stuff like here, but yet the lack of being called out is a bigger. Yeah, it's the fact that it doesn't call it out. It's the fact that there's very little actual recourse or self-reflection from the Doctor after it happens. Why do you think they're saying torture is okay? I don't think they're saying torture is okay, but I think they're saying it can sometimes be really cool. I don't know who it's for. I don't know what it's trying to do. It's so strange. Need less unexperienced television writers. That's another thing from the behind the scenes. Apparently, Juno Dawson, when she was writing those scenes, the torture scenes with the Doctor and Kid, submitted the draft and was like, oh, how far can I go with this? And Russell was apparently the one who said, go further, go harder, go darker. This is on Russell. Juno Dawson has got she's got the sole credit, but that particular detail is it. It literally frames it as wrong. It does, yes, but only to a very small point. If you watch, like I said, the scenes after, where the Doctor he's looking at the glove, Belinda hugs Belinda. Belinda just goes straight for the hug. Like, there's no, like, Doctor, what are you doing, Doctor? What? They go straight for the hug. And then as soon as Cora and Wynn have their little aside, the Doctor just immediately goes back to being cruel to Kid. And for those in the chat saying, it was okay, Kid had it coming. Okay? There's a quote from the Sixth Doctor in The Holy Terror, written by Rob Shearman, who also wrote Dalek, who says that it doesn't matter to whom the cruelty is directed at, it's the cruelty itself that is wrong. Terrance Dicks wrote that the Doctor should never be cruel, should never be cowardly. And I think that the Doctor, torturing a genocide survivor, who is unarmed, who is not a threat to anybody, and to whom the Doctor has never even attempted to figure out why he's doing what he's doing, is cruel, is cowardly. And yes, the Doctor does often break his own rules. He's not perfect. He can relapse. I get it. But there's normally some fucking acknowledgement of it, right? The Doctor, I'm like I said, I'm literally just giving you what this episode... I'm literally just working with what this episode gives me. The episode ends with the Doctor saying, this is my Waterloo, this is my rise like a phoenix, and Belinda's like, du pois, Doctor. Like, literally 2 scenes ago, he was torturing a genocide survivor. Come on, folks. I'm not making this up. This happens in the episode. This massive moral failing is treated as just a little wobble. As just a little, even though this is meant to be the Doctor who is sort of like, maybe not fully, but has at least sort of gotten over what's happened before, And also, Ncuti Gatwa is the last of the Time Lords, yes, but he hasn't played it, and he's also not been written with the same heft and gravitas that David Tennant's 10th Doctor was given over those seasons. There's no like somber heaviness of the loneliness that he feels throughout the universe despite his companions. Ncuti hasn't played it like that. And maybe he hasn't been directed to. He hasn't been written like that. So the idea that, he's harboring this deep trauma that's a potential trigger that causes him to torture a genocide survivor who's unarmed and has already been, the threat's been resolved. It doesn't feel credible. It doesn't happen. Will the Doctor torture the Daleks? I can't imagine that. He does in Dalek in 2005, written by Rob Shearman, but then the whole point of that story is that the Doctor is confronted with him being a good Dalek. He's a terrorist. Tide Moonrabbit, earnest question. Do you think Guantanamo Bay is a good thing? The Doctor should be above this thing. I don't care if he's a terrorist. The Doctor shouldn't torture a genocide survivor when he's a genocide survivor. He hasn't even asked him what's happened. And then once he's done the torture, hands him over to the corporation who did the genocide, and then watch a performance from Cora, the only good Hellion in this story, who he never has an exchange of dialogue with, so we never actually hear the moral authority of the show actually talk with her. And also, I forgot as well, it's a fucking delta wave. It's a delta wave. It's the same device, it's the same MacGuffin that the Doctor was going to use in the Parting of the Ways. And for you folks in the chat saying he was going to kill X amount of people, in the Parting of the Ways, the Doctor was going to use the Delta Wave to kill all the Daleks, but it also would have killed everybody on Earth below. So what? Are you saying the Daleks should have killed the Doctor because he was going to kill all those Earthlings? Because that's the logical extension. The last time a genocide survivor was about to kill countless people with a Delta Wave in a Doctor Who episode was 20 years ago. And the way that the Ninth Doctor is framed and treated in that story is night and day to what happens to Kid here. But he didn't in the end. No, but he stopped himself. He talked himself out of it because he went on a character journey. That's not present here. The fact that Ninth has to do that right after the Time War makes me sad. Yeah, but it's also, like, if he'd just done that straight after the Time War, he probably would have done it, but it was his adventures with Rose that made him change that. It was possibly the moment you can pinpoint it is in Dalek, when he traps Rose in the bunker with the Dalek, and then is given the opportunity to save her, and he says, I killed her once, I can't do it again. It's in World War III when the Ninth Doctor says, I could save the world but lose you. And it's probably from that point onwards when, you know, the Ninth Doctor is kind of already dead. As in, like, his fate at that plunger with the Delta Wave is already sealed. Fist of Fury is right, coward, any day. It's like one of the most beautiful moments in Doctor Who history. And then we're given a parallel 20 years later. And it's one of the most disgusting things I've ever seen on Doctor Who. What about the real question of Duggadoo? Yeah, let's talk about Duggadoo. Maybe there will be repercussions. Maybe there will, but like I said, the fact that the episode itself ends on such a degree of finality is itself a massive... He's relapsing, that's the journey. He's relapsing, but the episode doesn't confront that. It's not in the text. I'm sorry, it's not in... I've watched the episode multiple times. It's not in the text. Any repercussion outside of the episode is too little too late, especially since this is meant to be the big blockbuster episode that will attract the most viewers. Not everybody's going to stick around to next week. Not everybody's going to make it to the series finale. You know. After the story in the engine, my wife told me at work, at her work, she's got a mother there who is from Lagos, which is where the story in the engine's set. And she's got an 8-year-old daughter who loved the story in the engine, who loved Ncuti Gatwa. And she's 8 years old. And I think that's absolutely lovely. And it kind of made me think back to 2018, when I was working somewhere. There was a Muslim single mother who worked there. And she had 3 daughters. And they were watching Doctor Who for the first time with The Woman Who Fell to Earth. And Yaz was their favourite character in TV ever. Obviously, they're quite new to TV, so the bar's not super high, but Yaz is their favourite character, and they love seeing Muslim representation in Doctor Who, in sci-fi, and one of the daughters was so taken with Doctor Who that they went on to watch the classic series, and they started with Colin Baker, and they bloody loved it.
Even more of me!
And when watching the Interstellar Song Contest, where Kid is meant to be the stand-in for Palestine in this particular Israel-Palestine allegory, I thought of that girl who wanted to see Muslim representation in Doctor Who, and now, 7 years later, the first Black Doctor, played by an actor of, you know, whose family survived a Rwandan genocide, tortures another genocide survivor. I think that's fucked. I'm sorry. I don't know if that's a bridge too far. I just think that's fucked. I'm sure if you dig deep into Doctor Who history, that, you know, I can probably find episodes that are, like, objectively worse than this one in terms of the production, the acting. You know, it's a well-made bit of TV. I'm sure I can, you know, find many episodes that I deem worse than the Interstellar Song Contest. However, it's been several days since the broadcast of the episode, and I'm struggling to think of another episode that I wish just hadn't been made. I just wish that this episode just wasn't put into production. I just kind of feel like if this episode is not willing to actually interrogate the themes that it's trying to talk about, if it's not actually willing to confront the topic that it clearly is trying to, like I said, it's called Poppy Honey, like the land of milk and honey. Like it's called, like, these are like pretty clear parallels that cannot have been accidental. Orphan 55 is probably a worse episode, but I don't think Orphan 55 probably shouldn't have been made. If you know anything about me, you know that I love nothing more than learning about the production history of Doctor Who. I want nothing more than like a tell-all book or a documentary about like the making of Doctor Who Flux, you know, the making a series during COVID. You know, I want a 6-part documentary series, preferably directed by Chris Chapman, about, you know, how Orphan 55 wound up in the state that it wound up in. You know, I think that would be fascinating. But honestly, I don't think I want to know the behind the scenes on the Interstellar Song Contest. I think ignorance might genuinely just like be bliss here. Once again, indulge me again. You know, it's my live stream, so you kind of have to unless you click away. This episode was probably being written around the time of October 7th. And was certainly in pre-production in the months after it. And basically what we're witnessing with that is the first live-streamed genocide in history, where for about a year and a half we've been seeing the most horrific images that could possibly be inflicted upon humanity coming out of that place. And I'm not gonna, like, you know, I want you folks to know what I saw in like November, December 2023. You know, I saw on TikTok, like I saw like live streams of Israeli soldiers like raiding the houses of Palestinian families and killing the people inside and the families inside, uploading videos and photos of them posing in front of children's swimsuits and children's underwear, bragging about the assault that they were doing to those children and to those families. I saw videos of Palestinian families fleeing war zones, going into buildings designated safe for them, and then those buildings that were marked as safe were then bombed and destroyed by precision missile strikes by the same people who told them it was safe. I don't know if Russell T Davies and Juno Dawson saw those same videos or saw those, maybe not, but there's millions of these stories that have been coming out since October 7th, and I just want to know, why did they actually decide to press on with this story? Why did they not hit the brakes? Why did they not think, if we can't say the right thing here, if we can't actually, you know, because of our position, making a story for the BBC or making a story for Disney. A couple of days after the broadcast of this episode, Gary Lineker was basically fired from the BBC for the very controversial position of being opposed to genocide. So I can understand, you know, to a point, Russell and Juno and those at Bad Wolf and stuff maybe not wanting to make a story that is wholly critical of the corporation in this case, because of the professional and personal blowback. But if you can't do that, then why even make the story? Why even do it? I don't... Is that a wrong question to ask? Like, why did they just... with everything coming out post-October 2023... I just want to know whose idea it was to press forward. I've said that I don't want to know like the behind the scenes of this story. I do want to know one thing. I want to know who the individual was who, come March or April 2024, decided, let's press on. Let's keep going. That's all I want. I want a name. Was it Russell? Was it a BBC higher up like, you know, Lindsay Salt or Mark Lindsay? Was it a Bad Wolf producer like Jane Tranter? I just want to know, whose feet does this fall at? Not necessarily to scorn, I just feel like I just want a name. When were the episodes in pre-production? From October 2023 to March, April 2024. Why did they think, okay, let's press on? Oh, we've already built the sets. Okay, repurpose them. We've already cast the actors. Great. Give them different roles. We've already written the music. Okay, repurpose the music. Anyway. The Rani. That's a pivot and a half, isn't it? I'm very glad that I don't have to eat my cats. You know, I can't remember when I said it, but I remember saying that if Mrs. Flood is an original character, I would eat one of my cats. Theo and Winnie could sleep soundly on the night after the broadcast of the Interstellar Song Contest. Yeah, I miss, like, good reveals, man. Like, when you've got, like, Utopia with the Master returning, when you've got, like, the Daleks at the beginning of Stolen Earth, you know, I don't understand why the Rani's reveal, literally like a 2-year-long build-up as to who Mrs. Flood is, and then it not only is it shot in a way that makes it look like a CBBC episode, like the Bi-Generation itself is not given even remotely the same like gravitas or framing or like visual ingenuity of Chanya Button's work in The Giggle. I don't know if it was a budget thing or a time thing, but it just came off like a really like reheated leftovers thing. And then it's like, okay, the Rani is going to bi-generate in front of two characters who don't know who she is, who won't understand, you know, the Rani will mean nothing to them. And then they just sort of walk off. The idea that, like, okay, this Interstellar Song Contest episode is the big one, is the big expensive one. You know, it's the one that's going to get the most viewers. It's going to hook them in to watch the finale. And then you end it like that. Jesus Christ. Oh, come on, man. Like, hi, Billy. I have to say, I respect that they're sticking to Bi-Generation, even if I can't stand it in concept or execution. I actually disagree. The idea that Bi-Generation in The Giggle was meant to be this whole sort of, like, unique thing that's never happened before, that, you know, it's this big mystical thing of Time Lord lore, and then oh no, I guess the literal next regeneration that we see after The Giggle is a Bi-Generation. Like, come on. Am I basic for getting really excited about the reveal? You'll only have that though if you know what a Rani is. My wife didn't give a shit. I mean, she knows who Archie Panjabi is, but that was kind of it. Like, and like, because she bi-generates in front of two characters who don't even know what a Time Lord is. Like, it doesn't mean anything. There's no heft to it. There's no like actual big emphasis. I don't know. It's just really poor. It's just really poorly done. It's like, it's fucking amateur hour, honestly. I don't know. And also, I was kind of really surprised in Doctor Who Unleashed when it turns out that director Ben A. Williams was the one who shot the Bi-Generation for the Rani. Because, like, there's no, like, the Interstellar Song Contest is otherwise a really good-looking episode. And then all of a sudden for the mid-credits scene, it just looks like I said, a CBBC, like, you know, second unit director thing. I don't know, it's like, what the fuck happened? And oh god, going back to the torture scene, the idea that even the Doctor's granddaughter Susan can't talk him out of that? God, how the fucking mighty have fallen. What's the bet they forgot to film it, so they had to rush it at the end? What's the bet that the episode ran under, so they had to film it? Like, yeah, they had to film it in a bit of a rush. I'm assuming it was part of the main filming block, because the Doctor Who Unleashed was there when it was being filmed. She did talk him out of it, that was the scene. Tide Moonra, I don't know if he gets fucking with me or trying to gaslight me or whatever, but Susan doesn't talk him out of it. Belinda walking in, I can play the scene if you want. I've watched it multiple times. No, I'm saying, don't fuck with me. She literally did the scene. So that's not what happens in the text. This is what I'm on about. We're like I think someone mentioned it in the chat earlier that in order to defend this, fans have to write their own fucking fan fiction to defend it. Right, here we go. Doctor's torturing. Okay. Grandfather. He keeps going. There we go. Okay, there we go. Yeah, then Belinda walks in. sees the Doctor doing it, but you can see that he doesn't enjoy it. I'm not saying he does. That's not what I said. I don't think that it would be worse if he was enjoying it. Doctor, and then that's what snaps him out of it. That's what does it. Well, that's all right then. Yeah, at least he didn't enjoy it. Yeah. Keep going. It's already stopped. Susan doesn't appear again until this little flash. Like this, I'm not going to play the full thing, but that doesn't happen. I swear she does. We've just watched the scene time. I think you've misremembered the scene. This bit as well. This bit fucking got to me as well. So after Cora's sung a song, the Doctor and Belinda are walking to the TARDIS.
From Belinda say, 12 points, Doctor.
I thought it was my Waterloo. Turns out it was my rise like a phoenix.
He says this after just torturing a genocide survivor without asking why he did what he did. Watching Cora's song, realizing why he did what he did, and then leaving with the corporation, presumably. I don't get what Russell's mentality is when it comes to television in the modern day. With Years and Years and The Giggle, it seems that Russell has developed quite a very cynical outlook on the world. Television being the big media art form of the 20th century, and it's made us more violent, it's made us more divided, it's made us angrier and stuff. Okay, it's a valid viewpoint. Russell also wants us to think that Cora being allowed to sing a song at the, being allowed to, not hijacking the broadcast, not forcing herself onto the stage, being allowed to, because you're the good Hellion, not like the other bad ones. You're the one who amputated your horns so that you could be an acceptable person in the eyes of a society that tried to kill you. You're the good protester. You're the one who shaved off your edges, and, you're the one who made yourself appeasable to us. It's so fucking depraved, man. God, it gets worse the more you fucking think about it. Yeah, she sings a song. Corporation aren't torn asunder by the last of the Time Lords, as it goes straight to the whole, this is my Waterloo. The only way, it can also be a trans allegory. It can work multiple ways. The only way the Interstellar Song Contest works, and I've seen a few people ask me in the chat what I would do to fix it. The only way the Interstellar Song Contest works in its current form is if three things. One, Belinda does not just go for the hug for the Doctor and then call him wonderful after seeing him torture someone who she's got all of the context for because Cora told her. Secondly, the Doctor immediately going to destroy the corporation, go all banana groves of villain guard on it. Like, at the moment that he realizes that he's done something wrong here. And thirdly, even in the light of that, saying it shouldn't have got to that point in the first place. Like, that's the three things that make this episode salvageable. There's a reason why, and I'm not trying to say this as like, oh, Mr. TARDIS is such a good Doctor Who writer. There's a reason why, if you've listened to the Collateral of Ivanhoe, I didn't send the antagonist Jewel to the fucking prison that ripped her arm off. I was very deliberate in that story that sometimes locking somebody up who's done a bad thing is not necessarily what justice is. Another thing you could do as well is like maybe not have a kid try and kill 3 trillion people. You ever thought of that? Maybe hijack the broadcast. Maybe make it look like the Hellions were doing something else and then subvert it. I don't know. Up until the Interstellar Song Contest, I was really enjoying this series for the most part. Robot Revolution and Lux was a bit of a shaky start, but then The Well, Lucky Day for the most part, and the Story in the Engine. It's a really good run of stories. Story in the Engine last week, like I said, we were like with a 10 out of 10 story. Everything I think Doctor Who should be. And then a week after, we've got the Interstellar Song Contest. And like literally, like it is the polar opposites in terms of morality, and I think we may have actually finally found a modern day equivalent to the Caves of Androzani up until the Twin Dilemma in terms of a quality drop. The Doctor should have just told Kid that the systems aren't the problem. It's even worse than that, man. It's like, this, not only are the systems not the problem, but maybe you deserved what happened to you, Kid. Cora's alright, but Kid, you deserved that one. And you know what? Corporation, not only will the corporation keep on going, I will hand you over to them. So fucked, man. Have you watched Andor? I haven't, but I have seen the comparisons. This isn't a Disney issue. Disney, from what I've told, because I've not been able to watch it yet, it doesn't say Kid deserved it. Tide Moonrabbit, you've already eaten your hat once in this live stream. Get a fucking second hat if you're going to commit to that one. Because the episode unambiguously does say that Kid deserves it. Because even after the bloody torture, the episode ends with the corporation getting called out. Yeah. They got called out. Oh, Donald Trump lied. We finally fucking got him. Doesn't work like that. I'm sorry.
Wonderful.
Doesn't work like that. He was going to kill 3 trillion people. It doesn't fucking matter, man. The barber was going to kill 7 billion last week, and the Doctor still held out his hand to help him. Fucking hell. No, I'm on your side. Okay, Foley. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. Yes, because the barber stopped. The Doctor stopped him. Are you telling me the Doctor stops villains without torture? Yeah, it has been known to happen. I did not hurt myself there. The barber was persuaded to stop, but the Kid was going full steam. Yeah, but the Kid was given no attempt to be talked down. It didn't happen. Like I said, the Doctor has to act massively out of character to justify the torture later. It was at 99%. Earnest question, do you think I'm, like, would have been okay with Kid killing 3 trillion people? I am okay with the Doctor stopping the Delta Wave. I am okay with the Doctor incapacitating Kid. I am okay with these things. I am not okay with the Doctor, children's icon and hero, torturing a genocide survivor who is disarmed. The plot has already been foiled. And also, we're talking about a fucking, like, genocide victim. And you're happy that the ending is that she gets to sing on the corporation stage and they have the whole, one person claps and then everybody else is like, it's fucking High School Musical? Come on, man. These are deliberate storytelling decisions. But guys dug a do, yeah. People are still buying the honey. Like, without clarity, without clarification as to whether or not the corporation is, like, torn asunder by the Doctor immediately after this performance, anything less than that is a tacit endorsement of what's happening. I'm sorry. Yes, Foley, you should cancel your Poppy Honey order. There's a line in the Pirate Planet, which I've not watched because I've not watched The Key to Time, when one of the characters is like, oh, look what I've done. No, you don't think that's wrong, do you? And the Doctor's like, wrong? It's an economic miracle. Of course it's wrong. That's who the Doctor is. It's left open-ended. So was Kablam. Kablam was also left pretty open-ended. We can hope that it ends positively, but the vibes are so off when the A-plot appears to, end with such finality. And then the Doctor and Belinda walk away going, Dupois.
Doctor.
I thought it was my Waterloo. Turns out it was my rise like a phoenix.
How was the TARDIS blowing up open-ended? I should have clarified. The A-plot is pretty definitively, in terms of vibe and tone, is definitively wrapped up. The May 24th and the Rani, that's clearly a loose end. I'm talking about the A-plot. Also, Cora was meant to be like the odds-on favourite at the start of the competition, right? Before everything went all die hard. And it turns out her song was My Big Feet. My Big Feet. How was she the favourite? Dugadoo was right there. The episode concludes that being passive and easily digestible for oppressors and not making any real change is the only acceptable form of activism. Basically, yeah. Yeah, you were genocided. You were genocided and, that's bad. We're not going to do anything about the ones who did it. You know, in fact, we'll actually hand you over to them, as the Doctor does the kid. You know, that's pretty bad. But, you know, that's kind of what the episode does. I don't know. Unironically, I kind of miss when, you know, activists were writing Doctor Who and they wanted to try and bring down the government. Andrew Cartmel and Ben Aronovich wrote Remembrance of the Daleks because they were so upset about Margaret Thatcher winning the election in 1987, 1988. Is June Dawson not an activist? No, okay, maybe she... I don't want to, like, ascribe that... Yeah, I shouldn't ascribe that to people who probably wouldn't want to... Maybe they wouldn't want to be called that, I don't know. I'm using the term flippantly, I'll acknowledge. Like, I don't think that Juno Dawson is anti-Palestinian. I don't think Juno Dawson is pro-Zionist, but I think that if you're not able to write an episode and broadcast an episode that extols those values, then don't bother, man. Don't bother doing it. Sometimes when you overanalyze, you can find legitimate issues but aren't as serious because the standard audience don't notice. You can analyze any message from anything to a point, but like I said, there's way too many coincidences for this to have not been an episode about that, right? It kind of has to have been. Like I said, like the poppy honey itself, the land of milk and honey, Moroccan oil, you know, the hosting itself of Eurovision, you know, the fact that this episode was still made after October 7th. Like, they clearly wanted us to engage with it on that level. Juno Dawson said on Instagram that it's all political. Like, you know, I've not conjured these things out of nowhere. These, you know, to quote the 12th Doctor, these things have happened, Zygella. These are facts. As I said this earlier in the chat, I wonder if the ending would have been better if we saw people responding to Cora's song by supporting her people or calling out the corporation. Yeah, but even then, like, I still think that anything other than a absolute dismantling and retribution and fire and rage against the corporation, that's the only way an episode like this needs to end. It's the only way to square the circle of this story. I don't think there's a way to do it. You're making me feel guilty about liking this episode. I guess I found it entertaining, and I apologize for that. But these are creative choices made by people. Shambles of Israel actually won there. Well, that's the thing as well. Ncuti Gatwa was meant to be the UK's representative to give the points to all the other countries at Eurovision. He was meant to be the ones to say, you know, welcome from the United Kingdom. We give our 12 points to so and so, and he was meant to do that. However, what happened was that Israel qualified for the finals, and then 2 minutes after that qualification, they released the press statement that Sophie Ellis-Bextor was going to replace Ncuti Gatwa because Ncuti Gatwa had to drop out. Now, the timing could be a coincidence. However, dropping a press statement at like 10:22 p.m., like that doesn't happen. That doesn't happen, you know? Like, they could have dropped it at 9 a.m. the next morning, and that might have been a bit more feasible. I don't think that Ncuti Gatwa or his agent were like, you know, get the Eurovision on the phone, we're dropping out. There has to have been some sort of, maybe not written agreement, but maybe a strong verbal agreement saying, if Israel get into the final, I'm not doing it. And holy shit, he dodged a bullet there, because he would have had to have announced that Israel got 12 points from the United Kingdom. Also, a lot of broadcasters who participate in Eurovision have been very skeptical of how legit the televotes for Israel were. Oh yeah, well, that is one thing that's like why Eurovision gets such flack as well as an institution, because they're clearly playing favourites. They're clearly giving preferential treatment to Israel. If another country breaks the rules or bends the rules or acts the way that Israel has done, forget the genocide. If you can, you know, like, little matter. Their behavior behind the scenes, their breaking and breaching of the rules, because you're not allowed to like have the UK government, for example, promote the UK Eurovision entry and say vote for this. They're not allowed to do that. Israel does. They buy massive like ad spaces and ad blocks in different territories to try and promote their entry, which you're not allowed to do according to the rules, but Eurovision just lets them do it. Wow, that's bad. Oh yeah. And also, I think it was last year or the year before, you had like the Israeli act like threatening and like basically abusing all of the other acts backstage, but Eurovision like didn't throw them out or disqualify them. Apparently the UK did well this year. Yeah, we were in the top 20. People seem terrified of Israel. Well, I don't even want to like ascribe a motivation here. Going down that way would take it down a very dark hole, I think. You know, then you're in sort of like Keir Starmer territory where he goes on LBC and it's like, oh yeah, Israel has the right to commit war crimes. You know, they can do that, even though apparently he was a human rights lawyer. Let me know if I'm off the mark for this particular bit, chat. The big difference between me and Russell T Davies, I think, is that if I say something really stupid, you can actually like tell me that it is stupid. But when it comes to like this script with Juno Dawson as well, first ever TV credit, I kind of feel a bit sorry for Juno Dawson. Now, like, she's clearly a massive Doctor Who fan. She's earned this opportunity, and then like she's saddled with this basically fucked from the start premise. And it bears her name, and it like I kind of feel like she was thrown under the bus here. Juno Dawson, who is a very talented writer, like it kind of feels like she's been thrown under the bus here, and this story is now going to be sort of like hanging around her neck for the rest of her life. I don't know. That's also just one reason why I just think this episode shouldn't have been made. She seems quite happy with the episode. Well, it's been broadcast. She's not exactly going to come out and disown it. You know, she's not going to say a week before broadcast, actually, don't watch it. It's bad. Don't do it. Like, there is still a base level of decorum that you kind of have to go with. And even Docu is depressing nowadays. Yeah, well, like, this episode just made me sad. I'm sorry. It made me sad. It's a BBC issue. It could be everything that we've been seeing coming out of the past few months, and even like the weekend of this story broadcast. There's that company who have made a documentary about hospitals in Gaza, and they've been pleading on social media for the BBC to release the film, and the BBC won't do it. They fired Gary Lineker, was interviewed by Amol Rajan, and Gary Lineker had to explain to Amol that the conflict didn't start on October 7th. Eva Dalek asks, is this worse than Empire of Death? I certainly feel more disgusted thinking about it. I don't know, it's too early for me to say. I don't want to go for the recency bias as to, you know, I am the true Doctor Who fan. The worst Doctor Who episode ever is the most recent Doctor Who episode. Empire of Death, it's a two-parter, so it's a longer story. It is also equally pretty muddled with some really weird politics to it. There is something to be said about just the visceral discomfort and just the pure sadness that I feel watching this story. I forgot to mention, why does the Rani regenerate after being in space when everyone else, presumably, who gets unfrozen survives? Well, out of the 100,000 people who are brought back from the brink at the end, is she the only one to die? Even though it turns out she's a Time Lord, so she would have been one of the most physically adept and most likely to survive in the vacuum of space. It's a commentary on the winter fuel being cut and how it hurts elderly people. 07 Jones J, you have won the live stream for this evening. Please pick up your prize at the door. Yeah, lethal for a time lady. Maybe it is. Maybe that's just why the Doctor was being frozen and nearly died. I don't know, but it's just yeah. It's so contrived. It's so contrived. Time Lords are very physically strong in terms of their durability, and they can survive in the vacuum of space for a very short amount of time. But it turns out the 99,999 other aliens at the Interstellar Song Contest were able to be brought back to life, and there's absolutely no problem with that. But the Rani actually dies. So contrived, man. It just makes it feel like that mid-credit scene was such a last-minute addition. How did the Doctor not go blind? Confetti cannon.